For Crema Media's Polity, I'm Sane Dhlamini. Former DA leader Tony Leon discusses 2019 elections. So, Mr. Leon, yesterday you were campaigning in El Dorado Park. What were some of the pressing issues that you had while you were campaigning there?
Well, people have incredibly difficult lives in areas like that, and some people there are better off than people in close by areas. And I think while the government at all levels, national, provincial, local, has various structures and forms of assistance, people often can't access these because they either get overwhelmed by an underperforming bureaucracy, or they simply give up, or they simply don't get the assistance they need. There was one woman I met yesterday whose son was shot dead, which is a feature of quite a few areas in South Africa, but Eldo's perhaps is also a bit of a flashpoint area. And you know, it happened over a year ago, and apart from her emotional distress, she wanted some form of closure. And you know, she never got to first base with the police, whether it had ever been investigated. No one seemed to have been apprehended. So I didn't meet too many happy folk there, if I'm honest about it. People really, you know, showed me empty fridges and real problems. And look, part of it's because those problems have a long history, but the other parts are, you know, there were far too many people at home who were able-bodied and should have been at work, and that's the consequence of living in a country which has a less than 1% growth rate. You know, if you do the maths of it, if we had the 5+% growth we were promised under the National Development Plan, you would double the national income per capita every 13 years. At the rate we're going, it's going to take 100 years, and those folk are just going to be left further and further behind. And then you've got the look, there are a lot of failures that are encapsulated in a lot of centres of failure in our country, unfortunately. There are some islands of success, of course. We're meeting in one of them today. This is a very first world, high-end place, this hotel. The staff's on strike, which might tell you something else, but that's another matter. And I was very struck by, you know, the failures of our education system again. And to me, that's the greatest failure, because since change, democracy, and the ANC all came together in 1994, we've had 25 years of the same policy path, and it's led to a situation where 12 out of 100 kids who start school will actually leave school with a university entrance qualification, and 50 of 100 who start school will not finish school. And so we've got some big failures, and they're all coming together now. The economic failures, educational failures, and the resource failures, which of course of interest to some of your readers, because our mining output has collapsed in this country. It's gone down by 80% since 1997. Now that does suggest to me, getting back to your question, whether it's in El Dorado Park or other places I've been on this rather intense visit of the last 2 days, that we need a course correction. And I guess that's one of the things I've been articulating, is that we should perhaps try a different approach, because we're doing the same things and the same people, you're going to get the same outcomes.
Yeah. You are saying that the EFF, which you know that has worked with your party, the DA, and helped them in Tshwane and Johannesburg, is a cult movement. Don't you think that your statement will undermine the current cooperation between the two parties?
Well, I don't know what the levels of cooperation actually are. It seems to be shrouded in a bit of fog, because they seem to very happily denounce each other without any assistance from me. You know, Mr. Malema went to Port Elizabeth and announced, purely on the man's race, not on his excellence, that he was going to get rid of the mayor to slit the throat of whiteness, which hardly seemed a gesture from a friendly party, certainly not a non-racial one. And I think the DA went to report the EFF to under some criminal procedures for something else, for the VBS saga. So they are competitive political parties. Quite what arrangements they made or didn't make, well, we'll see. But you know, I don't think the DA should be at the mercy of the EFF, because if the EFF wants to keep the ANC out of the Joburg and Pretoria, Tshwane metros, then they'll have to support the DA. If they don't want to, then they must support the ANC. It's a kind of binary choice. But we'll see what happens on the 8th of May to those arrangements, and how those three parties, ANC, DA and EFF, do here in Gauteng, because that might be more significant than who says what about whom.
Yeah, and the EFF leader has also come out saying that he will not consider entering into another coalition with the DA.
Well, I think
How
that's,
do you interpret that statement?
well, I don't really. He's also applied to become a member of the Ananda Club, so he does different things on different days, which sometimes contradict each other. So let's see what that means.
In the previous elections, the DA has received more votes from black South Africans than the EFF. Do you think that this will happen again?
I think that's a very interesting question, and my obvious answer is to wait until the votes are counted on the 8th of May. I hope so, because what the DA is trying to do is not say we're a party for some but not for others, or for blacks but not for whites, or the reverse of that. You've got very narrow sectional parties in this country. The DA is really the only one left in the ring that says we want to be a party for blacks and whites and coloureds and Indians, but obviously they've pretty much maximised the support among minorities, the DA. So they've got to make progress among the majority population. And I might say at all the events I've been at, which of course are party campaign events, the overwhelming number of activists are black, not white. So I think it's got a good infrastructure. But let's see how fed up people are on the 8th of May with what I've described as lived conditions on the ground. If they're satisfied, they'll presumably return a great number of ANCs. If they're less satisfied, I think they will vote for the DA and maybe some for the EFF. The difference, leaving aside the racial, non-racial part, is that the DA actually has a record of governance, and it has objectively, on measurement, of the least corrupt, the most pro-delivery governments, delivered more than any other party. There was there was a index that came out last week from Good Governance Africa, which said of the 20 best performing municipalities in South Africa, 15 of the 20 are governed by the DA or led in a coalition by the DA, and of the bottom 20, not one is DA. So I think that is an indication of why people who need the delivery most, look, bear in mind, more affluent people can buy their own delivery. They don't rely on the state. But those who need the state's assistance would probably get more bang for their buck if they vote for the DA.
You've also praised the DA leader, Mmusi Maimane, as a good leader, but at the same time you don't see him occupying union buildings. Why do you say that?
Well, I think on the most optimistic scenario, I mean, he might one day, but it's one day, not on the 8th of May. The DA is hoping to do better than it did in 2014. But that was at 22%. Now, you cannot go from 22% to 50% in one election unless there's some kind of earthquake, which hasn't happened here and probably in any other part of the world. So I don't think they can get national power, but they can get more power in a province like Gauteng. They can start building an alternative government, but it's not going to happen on the 8th of May.
Talking about now the ex-mayor of Cape Town, Patricia de Lille, they seem to have a thorn between her and the DA. How do you think the party has handled her matter?
Well, I don't want to sit. I had to deal with a lot of controversies when I was the leader, and I dealt with some better than others, some not so well, people would say. But, I think it was a messy affair, and it went on far too long, and it's still going on now. There seems to be a court action, and I think it's a sideshow, quite frankly. I mean, she was the mayor. She's no longer the mayor. She's formed her own party. And I guess that'll be another judgment on election day in Cape Town. How many people are going to vote for the DA and how many are going to vote for the good party? And that, once again, puts the power back in the hands of the people. The problem with it's a bit like a divorce. Well, it is a divorce. You get divorced, it's he said, she said, he said. Well, it's like that between de Lille and the DA. So the jury in this is going to be the voters in Cape Town. And I think the DA will do well in Cape Town, and I suspect de Lille's party won't do well, but we'll see.
Many people have complained about receiving SMSs and those telephone calls from the DA. What do you think of this form of campaigning?
Well, they asked me to record one, and I said no because
Why?
Well, because the moment I get a robocall, I switch it off and I get irritated. But you've got to use all the platforms you can, and technology has changed, and it's direct contact. We live in a world of social media, we live in a world of iPhones and so on. So I suppose, they must have done a cost-benefit analysis and realized they can reach people. And, it's a bit like the law of percentages. You will irritate a factor of people, but I don't think anyone will not vote for you because they get a robocall. But someone who might not have thought about it might vote for you. So maybe that's the calculation.
Yeah, last year you were criticized by the KZNDA leader, Zwagele Mngcwango, for speaking highly about President Cyril Ramaphosa. But you did it again yesterday. Don't you think that is going to cost the voters, your party, some votes?
I don't take political instructions from him. And I was in the DA a lot longer than he has been. And I am not, I'm not even going to comment about his particular thing. I pointed out an objective fact, which has been proven in every single opinion poll, that people regarded Cyril Ramaphosa's ascent to the presidency as a game changer for both his party and the country. That's a fact, not an opinion. Underneath Cyril Ramaphosa, you have a deeply divided party, which he perhaps controls 50% of. The other 50s with Jacob Zuma, Ace Magashule, and another bunch of rogues and charlatans and chancellors and even some criminals who are in their ranks. And I think it is very important, both for the DA and the country, to make a differentiation between a president who I think wants to do well, who's Ramaphosa, and a party which holds him back from doing well. So I think not to recognize that, of course, the pitch has changed completely since Zuma was president. So it's changed. But if you really want to affect change in a positive direction, a more pro-business direction, more pro-jobs direction, you've got to vote for a party outside of the ANC, because you must hope that that will influence the ANC to change. For every vote you're giving to the ANC, you're voting for Ramaphosa, you're voting for Didi Mabuza, you're voting for Ace Magashule, you're voting for Jesse Duarte. I mean, it is really a big risk undertaking. If you vote for the DA, warts and all, as I've also said, they've made mistakes, you have a unified position, a unified leadership, and people who broadly believe in the same things, and the things they believe in have proven to be economically successful and socially unifying. And I think that's what, at this very critical moment, of really on the eve of national insolvency, a potential final credit downgrade, and as I say, using a bailout to pay a bailout. We've had an emergency further funding of Eskom just last week, snuck through Parliament on the quiet. These are desperate times, and short of having a course correction, it's not going to change. So yes, Ramaphosa is a welcome change, but you've got to change more than the president.
Why do you view the ANC's BEE policy as a scam?
Well, we wouldn't have 10 million unemployed, or nearly 10 million unemployed people. We wouldn't see all the desperation I saw yesterday in El Dorado Park if BEE was a howling success. I mean, it has made a small coterie of people multimillionaires, billionaires. It's extraordinary to me that the Speaker of Parliament, now retiring, Baleka Mbete, got 26 million rand for lending her name to a mining venture to buy a mine which she had no managerial expertise or interest in. And I could go down the entire list, which is personified by my old friend Smuts Nkonyama, who said I didn't struggle to be poor. Well, that's fine, but the truth is that there are a lot of poor people in this country, and the policies that are embedded in BEE do not make folk on the ground or people out there more prosperous. It makes a small elite who are connected. The other thing is, it becomes a question of know who rather than know how. And now I go back to the statistic I gave you about the mining collapse in this country. I mean, we've had a lot of BE empowerment. There's a fight going on right now between the Chamber of Mines, the Minerals Council, I think they call themselves, and the government over this decision in the middle of the process where the government said, no, we want 30% BEE, not 26% of ownership. Now, if you go to any investor and you say, well, actually, I'm taking 30% of your equity and giving it to someone else, you're not going to get investors. So why are mining funders not coming to South Africa? Why are they going to Peru? I was with the ambassador of Peru yesterday, and it was embarrassing that Peru now outpaces South Africa as a gold producer. We have the greatest gold reserves in the world, and we're producing less than Peru. We just keep going down, down, down. People don't want to invest here. They don't want their equity taken away. They don't want to get involved in a potential Basasa or land up in the Zondo Commission. That's where a lot of those BEE deals go to die, because there is so much in them that is capable. I'm not saying everyone is corrupt and everyone is wrong, of course not, that is capable of corruption, that is capable of simply not delivering to the people who need it most, but arguably the people who need it least. I mean, and which keeps our economy at below 1%. If BEE was a howling success, you'd be living in a country of 5% growth, 5% unemployment, and rising living standards for all, and you're not.
Since you've praised our president, Cyril Ramaphosa, do you think he has what it takes to resuscitate our SOEs?
Well, he can only do that if he makes fundamental changes. And I've also said, and I'll say it again now, he's been remarkably quiet on the difficult choices he makes. You know, he makes an announcement here about Eskom, but where's the beef? We've made no further progress. He didn't back up his CEO at Eskom last year, who didn't want to give a 0%, didn't want to give a salary increase because it can't be afforded. We're going overseas now to borrow money to pay Eskom workers, which is already nearly 40% overstaffed, and the average salary there is 700,000 rand. Well, you can't sustain that and deliver electricity. You're going to have to make a choice. So he's, had a lot of conferences and summits and committees, and he's said many of the right things, but I haven't seen some critical and necessary confrontations. I mean, if Cyril Ramaphosa is going to turn around the economy, he's going to have to confront the unions. He's going to take on the teachers' lobby. He's going to take on the public servants, because those are consuming so much or delivering so little that if we don't change that, well, we're going to keep going down.
And lastly, what would you say to encourage the first-time voters to go out and vote on May 8th?
Well, to use the cliche, the future is in your hands, and you actually have got more interest in what's coming ahead than the older folk like me. I mean, because you're going to be around longer. And so I would say, don't be too cynical, don't be too detached. I said it this morning at a rally I was addressing of the DA, but it's true. I said, you've got a choice in life to either be an upstander or a bystander, and the bystanders don't get involved. Now, one of the issues of being an upstander is to do your duty, and voting is not such a difficult duty. There are other things you can do, but it took a lot to get us to a position where everyone had a vote of equal value in this country. And I think by going to vote, you respect both that which went before you, but also take some control of what your future could be.